Would you believe we have another small humanoid to discuss? Hi, I'm Reveler GM, and this is the show where we understand the undead, suss out the slime, and break down the beast. This is Meet the Monster, and today we are looking at the Kobold Warrior. Kobolds surely sound familiar, even if the design in Pathfinder is a little different, so let's have a look about what Monster Core tells us about kobolds in general first. Kobolds are small reptilian humanoids. They lurk in dark spaces, usually tunnels and mines beneath the earth, either in warrens of their own design or complexes discovered and colonised after their original builders have moved on. Though kobolds are far more pragmatic than courageous, they use every inch of their cunning to even the playing field between themselves and other stronger creatures. They attack from the darkness and at range, and kobold artificers and engineers master the art of simple but effective traps, which they use to protect their lairs. Kobolds are skilled at working together by necessity, and they often set up ambushes or hit-and-run assaults that allow them to do the most damage possible without them being harmed in return. Kobolds are diligent and hard-working creatures, and while some kobolds live in communal collectives that maintain neutral relations with the creatures around them, they can be easily swayed into serving malevolent powers or megalomaniac leaders. This is in due part to kobolds' innate pragmatism, as they would rather concede to servitude than risk being killed, but it is also due in part to a reverence for the power they generally lack. Notably, kobold eggs placed in proximity of magical creatures or places tend to absorb similar traits from the exposure. The resulting physical changes mark the appearance of each tribe, but a few lucky kobolds are also born with magical power that reflects their tribe's patron. You can certainly see the through lines here between them and goblins, but the connection with dragons, the kobold eggs' proximity to magic thing, and the knack they have with traps and mechanisms certainly differentiates them well enough. So, now onto kobold warriors in particular. The typical kobold trains in tunnel fighting, learning to use simple weapons that are used in narrow spaces. Kobolds are capable of landing sneaky strikes against unsuspecting foes, but are just as quick to scamper off to safety when they don't outnumber their enemies by at least 2 to 1. Learning such information about the kobolds requires our usual recall knowledge checks. A society, humanoid, roll for DC 13, unspecific lore for DC 11, and specific lore for DC 8. These guys have the small and humanoid traits. These are 2 that have been prevalent throughout this list so far. Humanoid means like a human in terms of how they act and reason, and usually with 2 arms and legs. Small means, well, very little mechanically actually, but is more just a reference for what kind of size these guys are going to be. They also have the kobold trait. Shocker, I know. A creature with this trait is a member of the kobold ancestry. Reptilian humanoids who are usually small and typically have dark vision. An ability with this trait can be used or selected only by kobolds. Checks out, right? Moving on. As we just heard, kobolds have dark vision, so they can see well in the dark. Well, they can see in the dark. What they see is up for debate, as they only have a perception of +3. That's just about the low threshold for level -1 creature. Ouch. On to better things. Kobolds are proficient in a few skills and a couple of languages, something I may have skipped over in the past, so apologies for that. They can speak Common and Sakroth, legally distinct Undercommon. They are trained in acrobatics and in stealth at a +5, which is pretty high. They are small and nimble, and like staying out the way of larger folk and larger creatures, so this helps reflect that. Their +2 in crafting, on the other hand, is low, but also lets us know that even the common warrior kobolds have an interest and some skill with tinkering and building things. I'd say this skill is more of a narrative one, rather than for mechanical use, but obviously it doesn't mean you can't try and use it somehow. Kobold's movement speed is the same as most humanoids, 25 feet. The standard for anyone in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And the attributes are +1 to strength, +3 to dex, -1 to con, +0 to intelligence, +1 to wisdom, and +1 to charisma. For defences, a kobold is doing pretty well with their AC at 16, putting it well into the high bracket for level -1 creature. They do have leather armour and a high dex, which pushes us up. The HP is in the middle at about 7, so that's a little bit of staying power. They can probably take a hit at low levels if you can land one on them. Now the saves, less good. +3 for both fortitude and will, which is borderline terrible, but an understandable trade-off for that high AC and for the +7 reflex save, which whilst not the highest at level -1, is still certainly up there at the end of moderate. These guys are crafty and quick. They aren't planning on toughing it out in a fight. They probably want to catch you off guard with ambushes and traps and get out quick. If they take a hit, they're probably turning and running, which their low will save helps represent too. They have an additional action as well that helps assist with this, scamper. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind scampering down to the subscribe button, that would be really appreciated. You don't have to scamper. You can stroll if you prefer. Scamper costs 1 action and requires the kobold to be adjacent to at least 1 enemy for them to be able to use it. If so, the Kobold can use the action to stride, that's move, up to their full speed plus 5 feet, so 30 feet, and they also gain a +2 circumstance bonus to their AC against reactions triggered by this movement. That puts them up to a pretty wild 18 AC. The move must end in a space not adjacent to enemies, so it is a retreating move, or at the very least a regrouping one. Regrouping, you say? Well, yeah, on account of their preference for ranged weapons. Let's take a look at offense. Kobold warriors have a spear, a sling, and 20 bullets. They're probably stones, they're probably not, actual bullets. The spear can be used in melee if needed with a +3 to hit, -2, -7 for follow-ups, for 1d6 +1 damage. That's not very good. But they can throw it too. It has a thrown 20-foot trait, and they're on a +5, +0, -5 for this, still for 1d6 +1 damage. Alternatively, they have their slings. These are also +5 to hit, but for 1d4 bludgeoning damage, the spear being of course piercing. These instead have a 50-foot range, as well as the propulsive and reload 1 traits. Propulsive means you add half your strength modifier to damage. If it is positive, that gives us 0.5, so we add nothing. If your modifier is negative, however, you do take that full number from the strength, so -1 strength means you are going to be reducing damage when using a propulsive weapon. Reload 1, you take 1 action to reload your weapon. Gotta put another bullet in the sling. Okay, so that's better, but the damage still isn't great, and a +5 isn't a whole lot better than a +3. I mean, it is the difference between a crit and not a crit, but it's still very low on the level -1 attack modifier list. A moderate is +6, and a low is +3, so yeah, these are both pretty shocking. But we're missing one more factor. Kobolds get sneak attack. It's 1d4 extra precision damage against an off-guard foe. This makes more sense now, right? With their traps, ambushes, and stealth, the Kobolds get the drop on unaware or off-guard foes and then attack them. Off-guard gives you a circumstance penalty to AC of -2, which essentially ups those attacks to being +7s, which is still not crazy good, but between moderate and high at least. If they hit, those do either 2d4 or 1d6 +1 and 1d4 damage. If you have a handful of Kobolds plus maybe a trap going off and dealing some damage, then suddenly they're a lot more dangerous. After the initial strike, they can keep pelting stones from afar, charging with their spears to finish off downed targets, or see things haven't gone as well and leg it, using scamper if required. And that's pretty much the Kobold warrior. So how can we mix them up? Well, much like the Goblin, we will be seeing many more Kobolds down the line, so we'll cover some angles in the future for sure. Otherwise, the Kobold information we read earlier gives us a great suggestion: the eggs. Or at least the fact that the eggs can imbue magical traits into the Kobolds. Dragons, they say, are a classic, and maybe that grants your Kobold a breath weapon, a little elemental resistance based on the colour of the dragon, or however we do it in Pathfinder now. It's a little bit different to how it is in 5e. Or even maybe give them wings. If it's an elemental space or an elemental itself, perhaps a stronger resistance to that element and more affinity or fascination with their element. A bunch of earth ones are covered at later levels, makes sense because they live underground, but maybe a water elemental would grant them a swim speed and underwater breathing, or at least the ability to hold their breath for longer. Or a fire elemental may grant them like a simple fire cantrip equivalent to just being able to do some fire stuff innately, and maybe they feel the effects of hotter climates a little less. Fae being another option could lead to some really unique Kobold ideas, maybe get some really tiny ones, like the actual tiny size, with little fairy wings that like to make little intricate magic traps, or an iridescent Kobold that kind of shimmer and kind of disappear, or some kind of Kobold dryad. Maybe they're tied to a special bush rather than a tree, and they construct all manner of traps around it to kind of keep it safe. That could be very silly or very cute, or both. But also, as with goblins, Kobolds don't need to be foes, or not all the time. You can play as a Kobold, and many are present in large towns and cities within the world of Pathfinder, with varying degrees of rights and respect. Kobolds could be running a construction firm and need some specific materials from another town, or a less than savoury location perhaps that they need you to go collect. They might be living in a sewer, mostly content, but some other creature has recently moved in and is snatching Kobolds, and they want you to help them flush it out, both for their sakes and for others above ground in the city. Or maybe it's a band of Kobolds with some eggs that they want to be safe by granting them magical gifts, and you're tasked with finding a magical location or beast that would facilitate this, and allow you to leave the eggs by them. That could be quite a cool adventure hook. So there we are. Kobold warriors. Sneaky and crafty, ambush ranged fighters, some skirmishing ability but not built for sticking around in melee long, or combat on the whole for long either. But if a few of them get the drop on you and they get some good rolls, things could go downhill very quick. Best stay on your guard when you're investigating the underground caverns of these little reptile guys. Let me know any twists you've put on kobolds in the comments below, and don't forget to watch the other monsters we've covered so far in Meet the Monster. But until next time, that's all. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.